Hi Year 8s, we're going to do a prac from home today. It's in Education Perfect, it's also in Cambridge, so there's a few different versions of this prac. It is, what we're going to be doing today is growing crystals, salt crystals, and looking at the rate of cooling as to how big your salt crystals get. So let's start with what we need to start off with, our ingredients. In Education Perfect, they say you need 2 cups of water. It says 3 cups of salt, doesn't matter what salt. I think only about 1.5 cups is plenty. A couple of jars. If you don't have jars, there's lots of alternatives you can use. You can use a drinking glass. You can use a mug for this one. You also need a couple of pencils. Again, if you don't have pencils, there's alternatives. You can use skewers, or something, or you can even use a peg. You need some string. Easy enough to find around the house. If you don't have string in the kitchen, you can find some sewing string, which is what I've used here. That is about it for our ingredients. So, what's the first thing we need to do when starting? Looking at our safety precautions. In Education Perfect, it says to wear a lab coat. I brought my lab coat home with me, but not many of you do have one of them at home. So you can use an apron, which I've dropped. You can use an apron. It also says to wear safety glasses. Now, I don't think anyone's taken their safety glasses home. If you have glasses, that's fine. But as Year 8s, you'll be heating some stuff, so you might want some adult supervision. Okay, so let's get started. Before doing an experiment, we have to make sure we've got all our ingredients and everything ready to go, because once it starts, sometimes it's a little hard to stop in the middle of it. So what we need to have, we've got our water and our salt. It doesn't matter what type of salt you have. I've even got pink salt here. I'm going to measure out my salt. Have that ready to go. I've got my water ready to go. I've got my jars ready to go. If you're using a glass, a drinking glass, it's not good putting hot stuff straight into a drinking glass. So one thing you can do is put it into a sink or a bucket or something. I've got a bucket here of hot water, just to get that glass to a right temperature. But your mug, if you're going to use a mug or 2, they're okay, because they're used to having boiling hot water put into them. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be putting boiling water into our glass containers. So we want to set up our string on a pencil. And we want to make it so that it's not touching the bottom. Pencils are really good because you can, well, I'm trying to tie that string up and it's moving around. A little bit of sticky tape helps there. Stop it moving. A little bit of sticky tape. Now I can roll my string up to the height I want. And a pencil's good because it will sit on top. I can see it's not dangling on the bottom. And it's ready to go. It's at the correct height. Okay, I've got about a cup of salt in here. This is one I did yesterday and the leftovers. I'm going to add my 2 cups of water. my pot on the stove. And the method says to stir it until it all disappears and boil it till it all disappears. This is where you need adult supervision. Sometimes when it starts to boil, it can spit at you, and that's where it can be a bit dangerous and hit you and get in your eyes. So this is where you need your protective clothing. As you can see, if you can see this, my salt is dissolving. The salt I had in this pot is dissolving in my hot water as my water heats up. So hopefully all of that will dissolve. Once it's all dissolved, we need to add more, and we need to add more, and we need to add more, until no more will dissolve when the water's boiling. That means it's a saturated solution. It can't fit any more salt particles in amongst that. Okay, and we'll keep that going for about 5 minutes or so. So we're not boiling yet, but just to be silly, I'm going to add some colour to it. As you can see, my salt solution is now boiling. It's green, it's a little hard to see what's happening down the bottom, but if I lift a spoon you can see that some of the salt still hasn't dissolved. That means that we now have our saturated solution. If you're not sure, add a little bit more. Won't hurt, I'll just add a little bit more. Just to make sure that that salt is everywhere. But I'm pretty happy that I have a saturated solution. Now the next part says to pour this into your jars. If you keep your jars in the sink in some warm water, they do tip over, that will help with the slow cooling, but it's not that necessary. We've got a little bit of salt at the top, as you can see, but that might interfere, but it's not going to be too bad. So come over here, Mr. Cameraman, follow me. I'm just going to pour some salt solution into my jars with my string and pencils on the top. I don't want to pour any of the stuff that's in the bottom of the pot. You can see the stuff that hasn't dissolved. So we might leave it at that. And you can see there's a lot there that hasn't dissolved. Now it says to leave it for about 10 minutes and then put one of them in the fridge for a few days and one of them leave on the bench somewhere for a few days. And then we look at measuring the crystals that will grow. Let's look at our results. These have been sitting around for a little while, a couple of days for some of them, or a few hours. I did a couple of experiments here. In these ones, I only poured a little bit of solution into the glasses and put one straight in the fridge. So this side all went in the fridge. This side I left sitting on the bench. And if you take a closer look, which we'll do in a sec, you'll see the size of the crystals. These ones that cooled down very quickly have formed, while it looks like there's more of them, they've actually formed smaller crystals. That's because the solution cooled so quickly that the crystals didn't have time to join to each other. These ones, you'll see, should have larger crystals because as they've cooled slowly, the crystals have had time to form together and form bigger and bigger crystals.